Welcome to the Travel Plus Loyalty podcast series. Your host today is Henrik Olsen.
I think in general, there's one word to sum up the Singapore Airlines result, and that is records. We had record load factors, record revenue, record operating profit, as well as net profit. And this is in our 78-year history. We have never achieved such good results.
You just heard Mohammed Raimi, who is the general manager for Singapore Airlines in the Nordics. He and his colleagues are happy these days, and with good reasons. Singapore Airlines have just released its highest profit in the airline's history. The passenger load factor was upped by 55% to 85.4%, the highest in the group's history. The main airline recorded a passenger load factor of 85.8%, while Scoot delivered 83.9%. Also, the cargo revenue remained 83% above the pre-COVID level recorded in the calendar year of 2019. With the opening of China again, this also helps the forecast for a great next fiscal year for Singapore Airlines. We see that the planes from Denmark to Singapore is quite full, and even some departures are sold out in several cabins. So we might also soon see daily departures again. But let's get started with our interview and say welcome to Mohammed Raimi from Singapore Airlines. And we have a special guest today, and welcome to the Travel Plus Loyalty podcast. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, Henrik, and nice to be here. I think I've been in Copenhagen here at least for almost 2 years. I think this August will be my second year here, and it's a wonderful city and a wonderful country. I've been in Singapore Airlines for just under 10 years, actually. So before this, just prior to this, I was based in India, in Chennai, for 4 years. And before that, I was in head office in Singapore doing network planning in the network planning department for about maybe three years and 3.5 years. So relatively short experience, but definitely not simple experiences. I think these experiences have prepared me, I guess, for this role in the Nordics. And of course, in the Nordics here, my jurisdiction covers Denmark, Sweden, Norway, as well as Finland, overseeing the Singapore Airlines operations here in Copenhagen Airport. We've been here, Singapore Airlines have been here for about 46 years currently. So last year we celebrated a 45th year anniversary in the airport. So it's been a long time that we've been here. We've seen through the entire landscape, how the Nordics landscape evolved. So it's nice to be part of this experience and part of this history.
And that's good as a Nordic director or general manager in the Nordics. Congrats on the very impressive final results that were just released yesterday. One of the very impressive numbers was an 85% increase compared to last year. So a really interesting comeback in the industry and also from Singapore Airlines. Can you put some words on the results in numbers and what that means for Singapore Airlines globally and in general?
Yeah. I think in general, there's one word to sum up the Singapore Airlines result, and that is records. We had record load factors, record revenue, record operating profit, as well as net profit. And this is in our 78-year history. We have never achieved such good results. But to take a step back, I guess I bring ourselves back to the start of the pandemic and where we are at that point of time. Singapore Airlines, I think, as maybe some of you may know, is a purely international airline. We have no domestic market. We do not have. We have a population of 5 to 6 million in Singapore, and so the market is small. And when the Singapore market closes, I think that's where our capacity as well suffered. So at the peak of the pandemic, I think around April 2020, we were down to 3% of our pre-COVID capacity, and we had nowhere to fly. All borders were practically almost closed. But at that point of time, I think there is a very clear strategic vision, both from management as well as from the employees, as how we were to move forward. We had an experience before, I think in 2003 during the SARS, but that was when it was only very much in just Southeast Asia and in Asia in general, but this affects the entire world. So we don't have a playbook, but we have a clear strategic direction. So the first thing I think that the management do was to shore up our liquidity, and I think that is the most important part. I think as an airline, to operate something with asset heavy, the aircrafts and everything, you need the liquidity, you need the financial ability to continue going. So that was the first thing. And we were one of the best capitalized airlines in the world at that point of time, with over 100 billion Danish crown in fresh liquidity that was raised. With that, at least it gives us the confidence to continue our operations, to continue putting the confidence in our passengers that we will be back stronger post the pandemic. And with that as well, we also realized that one of the most important things is the preserving the core capabilities. I think you see around the world whereby there is a shortage of resources, not just in terms of parts and all that, but also manpower resources. I think the pilots, the crew, the cabin crew, the ground staff. And one of the main strategic direction that was made at that point of time was to keep our core capabilities, keep our staff, keep those with the knowledge within the company, so that when the time comes to rebound, we would rebound as fast as we could, and faster than everybody else. In other words, first off the blocks. So we kept our cabin crew going. We put them into other industries that require the assistance. For example, in healthcare, whereby you need the COVID swabbers, you need maybe nurses and so on. They are able to transition to that while waiting for the aviation industry to recover. So we kept that cabin crew core, as well as the pilots as well, who also assisted in some of those activities. At the same time, I think we kept our resources going. So our airplanes, yes, there were some that were stored, they were in storage in a sense, but while we were operating less than 10%, 20% of our capacity, a higher percentage of our cabin crew, our pilots, and our planes were flying, because we used them at a lower utilization rate as compared to the capacity that we're deploying, so that everybody has a chance to be in tune with the new procedures, processes, and so on. And so as our plane, they get to be properly maintained. And for the ground staff, I think we kept most of them. I think a lot of them have also made sacrifices in terms of pay cuts and so on to assist the company in preserving the liquidity. And while that, we also gear up for the recovery. So when we have the liquidity, we have the core capabilities, we then gear up for the challenge. We try to reinvent processes, look at the market trends, what is the passenger wants and all, what the passenger wants and all that, and we implemented. So we digitized quite a lot of processes. We invested in new products and services. As one thing was the KrisFlyer lounge that was reopened, a new refurbished KrisFlyer lounge in Terminal 3 in Singapore. So we continue to invest in all those new products and services and capabilities to gear ourselves up for the recovery. And all that led to us being first off the blocks once the borders reopened. If you look back, maybe Europe was one of the first to reopen in that sense, while Asia Pacific was more closed. I think this was early 2021 or so. So at that point of time, we still operated to the Nordics, our A350s, with a passenger aircraft that is only carrying cargo. We continued that operating that cargo lane, so that it allows us to bring goods from one end of the world to the other end, like vaccines, healthcare products, and so on, which is much needed at that point of time. But at the same time, that allows us to already establish that air link between Copenhagen and Singapore. Now, moving that moving the timeline forward a little, and then Asia started reopening, and Singapore introduced vaccinated travel lanes whereby the passengers have to be vaccinated to enter into Singapore and so on. So at that point in time, we have the resources already ready to capitalize on this pent-up demand, and we are able to launch quickly, increase our services from 3 to 5 times weekly to capitalize on this demand. And not only that, because when Europe was reopened already, we looked at opportunities, ad hoc opportunities, being opportunistic in that sense to open up traveling between Copenhagen and Rome, and that is to allow people in Denmark to experience a world-class 5-star airline product from Copenhagen to Rome. So that was also to allow us to keep the air link with Rome as well. At the same time, also allow that fifth freedom sector between Copenhagen and Rome for passengers to travel that sector. So, and then we move again forward to April 2022, when more Asian countries, Asia Pacific countries start to reopen. You see Australia, Malaysia, Indonesia started to announce border reopenings and so on. And that was when really the travel started booming. But at that point of time, we were already prepared. We were already in the market, and that allows us to capitalize on the market trend. So that's what led to the record load factors, record revenues, and so on. So the result wasn't kind of like a fluke in that sense. It was years and years of preparation and preparation to get to this point where we are able to be confident that we are on the right track moving into the post-pandemic world. So, yeah.
So if we just capture that a little bit, you're saying the very impressive result you have this year or the last year was actually a reason for how you acted throughout the pandemic, that you still had a lot of your cabin crew and so forth. So compared to other airlines, that was very low, that has laid off a lot of employees, that have parked a lot of airplanes, they are longer in the restart period than Singapore Airlines was. You were basically able to increase the frequencies and pulling out aircraft faster than other airlines. Is that correctly understood?
Yes. So I think the phrase that I mentioned a couple of times was being the first off the blocks. Basically to capture this pent-up demand, be there when the demand is there. So right now, of course, there is maybe a supply constraint in the whole industry. There are airlines that are still, I think, for example, I think I can quote a figure whereby we are about over 20% ahead of in our capacity, in our recovery to pre-pandemic capacity as compared to the Asia Pacific Airlines. So we have been first off the blocks. We have been there to capture that demand.
And that growth from the above 85% compared to last year, and you had a load factor of above 88% as well, which also is a quite large increase in itself. Some of the numbers, and see how do you get your revenue? It's split between the mainline, so Singapore Airlines, but also Scoot. How is it looking from these two airlines? Are they growing in the same speed, or is Scoot having a larger chunk as well? Because we saw Scoot before the pandemic was coming into Europe with some routes. They're now not here anymore. But how does that look on a rebound?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll take the first part of the question first in terms of where our revenue comes from. Of course, as the mainline carrier, Singapore Airlines, the full service carrier, we of course have contributed the bulk of the revenue to the SIA group, but we have other subsidiaries as well, as you mentioned, Scoot, as well as Singapore Airlines Engineering Company, SIAEC, which is our engineering subsidiary. So the revenue comes from these three sources, as well as, of course, our other stakeholders in India and so on. So in terms of revenue contribution, Singapore Airlines is by far the largest revenue contributor to the Singapore Airlines group. But Scoot, in this sense, I think there is when you look at how much Scoot has recovered as compared to pre-COVID capacity, they have recovered way more than the Singapore Airlines full service carrier. So this shows that it was the right strategy for us to have that vehicle in this post-pandemic world to allow us to relaunch routes where it was recovering faster than most of the other routes that Singapore Airlines ourselves are serving. So actually, Scoot is more or less just under about 90% of pre-COVID capacity. Singapore Airlines right now, we are around 82% of our pre-COVID capacity. So Scoot has recovered way more, and their load factors is also pretty much comparable to the Singapore Airlines mainline. They are also profitable in the financial year that has just passed. To your question about maybe relaunching routes to Europe because they were there previously. So right now they are still in Europe actually. So they are still operating to Athens as well as to Berlin. Yeah. Previously during the pandemic there was a short experiment per se in that sense to launch between Gatwick and Bangkok. So, but that has been removed or terminated. And so they are just having these two destinations in Europe. Of course, I think Scoot will always look into where there is opportunity to launch routes in Europe. But of course, as you know, the macroeconomic environment right now may be a bit unfavorable as well, especially due to the war in Ukraine as well as the high fuel prices. So it affects routings and so on. And with high fuel prices and longer routing, of course, it leads to worse economics in that sense for them to fly. So while it will not be, there's no short-term plans, but I think they are always looking at longer-term plans as to launch more routes in Europe. Yeah.
Okay. So the strategy that Singapore Airlines had with Scoot, with the Mail Airline, with the combinations of InterAsia, the merger of the two airlines there, and the rebranding of that actually is what has made the foundation for the result we are seeing. I can hear, and it's growing in all sectors basically. How is it looking when you're coming as with frequencies and looking at that from a Nordic point of view. So as from your chair as general manager in the Nordics, how does the 23 look like? How does the summer look like? How does the coming winter look like, seen from the Nordic point of view?
Okay, so I'll take that question by moving back to January 2020. I think that was when we first launched daily flights to Copenhagen, up from 5 weekly, and then the pandemic hit. So then we slowly built up back our capacity from 3 to 5, and that's where we are now at 5 times weekly. Looking ahead, I think the summer period has been quite good, and it's looking very good, especially. I think the trend is that more and more people are booking earlier to snap up the seats, and I think that if you're booking very late, it's very unlikely that there will be seats available, as well as, of course, a higher fares. But it's looking very good all the way up to around September, October. You see some tapering off, but at the same time, the demand is still greater than it was back in pre-pandemic. So I think the overall trend here is that people are booking earlier, people are planning earlier, especially for long-haul flights. I'm not privy to information of short-haul flights, but for long-haul flights, we do see the trend that people are booking much earlier than before pre-pandemic. So in terms of our forward plans in a sense, of course we want to go back to daily. I think that is our goal. I think when I first came here back in August 2021, is that to reinstate the Copenhagen frequency to daily. Of course, there are factors that affects whether you increase your frequency or you launch new flights or new destinations, and we will work to get that around, and hopefully we will see daily flights in Copenhagen soon. We have that market, we have that demand here in the Nordics to do that. Yeah.
So and it looks, of course, and sounds perfectly that you're going as a target to go daily. And also when looking at the ticket prices for that, it's a little bit more expensive than in 2019 to go to Singapore and beyond. I must say that when looking at it. And yes, it's I think we have for the audience that there is a small chance to get a decent price in the end of the year and beginning of next year. That's what you tell that there are a little bit more availability there.
Yeah, I think that the key learning point or lesson is that book early to snap up the great fares. Yeah, because to be fair, I don't think we are more expensive, or I think the fares are more expensive as compared to other airlines. It's more that I think the seats availability, I think demand and supply affects prices in that sense. So it's not that, and yes, prices or rather fares have been higher than it was pre-pandemic, but also a function of supply in the market. Yeah.
Yeah, and if we compare to flying, let's say, from Europe to North America, though the capacity there is basically the same or above 2019 or pre-pandemic, so we see prices are actually the same from that point. And flying east, you mentioned yourself that the capacity is not there yet, so there is a higher demand there, and therefore higher prices as well. When it comes from the rest of the Nordic countries, what is Singapore Airlines strategy there in terms of corporations and routes, frequencies and such? How do you deal with Stockholm, Oslo, and Helsinki?
Yeah, I think as you're aware, we did operate as well to Stockholm via Moscow, of course, at that point of time, pre-pandemic, and it was stopped during the pandemic. I think the longer term goal is, of course, to come back into that market, to serve that market. Unfortunately, currently, as we all know, the longer flying times and so on, it's not favorable in that sense to launch. But at the same time, I also like to say that I think our operations in Copenhagen is also well supported by our JV partner, SAS, which feeds us the passengers from Norway and from Sweden, and to a smaller extent Finland as well, to the Copenhagen hub in that sense, to allow us to fill up more of our planes. So in that sense, they have been very good in supporting us into supporting our frequencies here in Copenhagen and making sure that our flights fly full almost every single day. Yeah.
And we look at the split between passengers, but also a little bit on freight. Let's take that afterwards. But the passenger split. So are Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark? How does that look compared to pre-pandemic numbers? Are Norwegian people a little bit more eager to fly, or they're less eager to fly compared? How does that look from your chair?
I think from I think okay. If you look at all four markets on a high level, I think the Danish market has recovered more in that sense, especially for I'm talking specifically for long haul travel, and we see a higher contribution on our flight from Danish passengers. I think if you drill down to the so-called offline points where we don't operate to Norway, Sweden, and Finland, we see that there are the Norwegian market has actually recovered more than the Swedish market for long haul travel, and I think for Norwegian market is also there's a very high concentration of corporates who travel out of Norway, of course, for oil and gas and so on, and that has also more or less recovered in that sense. That is traveling on us. That we can see that is traveling on us. But in terms of leisure market, I think pretty much about even in that sense between Norway, Sweden, and Finland. So we see more support from the Norwegian market in that sense, and more travel, not just actually outbound but inbound as well. I think if you look at the post-pandemic trend, people want experiential travel. People want to experience something that is unique. So I think Norway also allows that. So the inbound market into Norway as well has been quite resilient, and I think more resilient than it was pre-pandemic, especially from the Asia-Pacific source markets.
Okay, well, interesting actually. Also, the inbound market is returning again. So if we look a little bit about the split between leisure and corporate, you mentioned a little bit that the corporate is also coming back. How do you see that as a general here from the Nordics to Singapore and beyond? Is there a good split there? Can you see the corporates are coming back, or is it looking very much leisure heavy on especially looking at the premium economy and the business class cabins?
I think for the corporate market, while in terms of passenger numbers, it has not recovered to where it was pre-pandemic, but at the same time, while the corporate market was filling up, our business class, the contribution to our business class was higher pre-pandemic. Now we see that the premium cabins, the premium economy, the business class is being filled more by people who are traveling on leisure travel. I think it's also a function of the pandemic that has driven people to appreciate having the additional space, having the comfort, the food to enjoy their travel a bit more. So we see more leisure travel filling up our business class cabin as well. So while the corporate market has not fully recovered in that sense to the pre-pandemic level, that has not affected our business class or premium economy load factors in that sense, because they are being filled up by people traveling on leisure travel. Yeah.
So the investment in premium economy was a success, basically. Not because of probably the reason why it was introduced, but actually it are helping on the recovery because of the leisure travels as well.
Yes, it definitely has helped us in terms of offering our customers a better experience. I think more seat leg room, better food and wine selection as well in our premium economy cabin. So that has differentiated the experience and allowed that differentiated experience for our passengers in that cabin who may not possibly want to pay for the business class cabin but wants a different experience from the economy class cabin. But that said, our economy class cabin is one of the best in the world as well, with the ample leg room as well as the food selection that we offer on our flight. So we have that different choices of experience that you want, of course, at the different fare levels in that sense for our passengers to travel, and that also depends on their taste and on what they want to experience. Yeah.
And taste, culture, Singapore, and Singapore as a travel country, because we are coming to the end of our talk. So working at Singapore Airlines, do you have any insider tips for visiting Singapore? Because you mentioned food. Singapore is great for food. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think as a Singapore-based carrier, I think we have very much aligned to interest to promote Singapore as well as a destination, not just as a transit hub, which I think a lot of people do see that. But Singapore as a destination itself, there is really a lot of things that you can do that you may find also in other cities, but now in a kind of like an island in about 700 square kilometers of land that you can find there. You have the beaches and so on, which is really well kept, well clean and all that. I think some new experiences that passengers can try to experience is that we have relaunched together with Singapore Tourism Board and Changi Airport the Free Singapore Tour if you're in transit for more than 6 hours in Singapore. And within that, although we have this already pre-pandemic, there are new experiences that are being that passengers can experience, like the cultural experience, like more of the off the beaten path experience, more to visiting the neighborhoods. Maybe you can probably see my home in Singapore. There's a tour that goes into the heartlands that where near I stay. There are other new things that come out in Singapore. I think Singapore has one of the world's best zoo, and recently they relocated the Jurong Bird Park to be located together with the zoo, and now it's called Bird Paradise. It's a really wonderful experience. I've not seen it. I've only seen it on Instagram. So the next time I go back to Singapore, I'm definitely going to see the Bird Paradise, because I heard that it's a wonderful all-in experience. I mean, although it's just birds, but still there's really a lot of different experiences that you can get there. So there's really a lot of new things that is coming up in Singapore. And it's not just what I think people read about, that it's a city, it's a small city, it's a financial hub, but there are all these off the beaten path experiences that I think anyone can spend a week there doing. Yeah.
So basically, you recommend people to do a stopover at least for a day or up to a week, spending there. In Singapore, there's lots of opportunities. Also, the stopover program, the free tours. But if you're not able to have a stopover on your home, so how is Changi as a transit airport?
Yeah. So currently Changi is almost fully reopened. There is only a part of Terminal 2 that is still being refurbished. So in Terminal 3, we have fully reopened, and we, as I mentioned just now, we have launched our new Kris Flyer lounge, both for our Gold passengers as well as the business class and first class passengers. So that is an entirely new experience, new concept lounge that is in Singapore that our passengers can experience. In terms of new experience or future plans in that sense, we would later this year also reopen a lounge in Terminal 2 as well. So passengers traveling to Southeast Asia or transiting to Southeast Asia can experience that lounge, new lounge in that sense. Yeah. So there is, of course, the bigger plan, because I think we don't sit still, and there is a bigger plan, of course, to open up a new Terminal 5, and that is in the a decade or so, and that would be able to have enough capacity that currently the entire Terminal 1, 2, 3, 4 combined, that Terminal 5 is able to take. So that would be, in a sense, we are not sitting still, but we expect that growth would continue, and we expect that we are able to support that growth with Singapore as our transit hub, and to be able to make use of that capacity decades into the future. Yeah.
So basically, with those words, that you still invest in the future, and you still see that you want to basically double the capacity of Changi Airport with the new Terminal 5, a decade ahead in the plan at least. Thank you very much for your time. It was good insights, both generally from your reports and also seen from the Nordic point of view. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you.
This means that we are in the end of this episode of the Travel Plus Loyalty podcast. Thank you for listening, and safe travel.